Yay Networks.
Welcome to the Great Girlfriends podcast, where we discuss life, love, laughter, and everything in between. I'm your host, Sibylla Muti, and I can't wait for you to hear all of the Great Girlfriend magic on today's show. So without further ado, grab something great to drink, grab your pen and your paper, and get ready for this week's episode. Enjoy! Great Girlfriends, happy Wednesday. As always, I'm so excited to be here with you today. It is my favorite time of year. If you're on the East Coast, the leaves are falling. It's nice and orange and just beautiful. And if you're on the West Coast like me, you've still got the really great sunshine. So either way you go, you have beautiful weather and warm smiles. And in the spirit of podcasting today, we've got great girlfriends to join us. So I'm super excited because I want to dive into what it really means for us to show up as community, as women, how we come together when we have these interruptions in life. What does it mean to have the women that are in your life that are centering you, hold you, and carry you to the other side? And I'm so excited because my favorite partners, Healthy Women, have joined together in partnership with Eastside and Meal Train to have conversations about what it means for us to help and sustain and what that looks like in different ways. And so I'm joined today with two dynamic guests. First, Dr. Roshani Patel. Hi, Dr. Roshani. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. And breast cancer survivor Christine Corrigan is here with us. How are you, Christine?
Terrific. Thank you.
Yes, it's so awesome to have you both here today. Are you ready for a riveting conversation about the power of us being women in good and hard times, and what that looks like to have that connective thread in your relationships as you're kind of navigating journeys?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Dr. Patel, would you do us the honor of telling us a little bit about who you are and what makes this topic so important to you?
I am a breast cancer surgeon. I'm fellowship trained. I did my fellowship training at Fox Chase Cancer Center. Once I came out of training, I actually moved to New Hampshire to start a breast program from scratch, which is a lot of work. But the one thing that I noticed as I was building resources for my patients and starting out my own brand of support groups, which were exercise based, were how my patients connected through these support groups and supported each other. Sometimes we had patients who did not have resources, and we began to have fundraisers to help with food and transportation. And a little bit goes a long way to encourage others to get through what can be a devastating diagnosis for many.
Absolutely. And there's so many things about that. What you just shared with us, Dr. Patel, that we probably take for granted on a daily basis: access to food, not necessarily about having the means to get to the food, but being able to have access to it. That can oftentimes be two separate things. And I love that we're going to jump right into that. Christine, who shared your wonderful story on the Healthy Women, Real Women Stories platform. I'd love to hear you share with us a little bit about who you are and what makes this topic so important to you.
Sure. So I am a two-time cancer survivor. I'm the author of, again, Surviving Cancer Twice with Love and Lists.
Wow.
My first diagnosis was in 1981 when I was just about 15 years old. I had Hodgkin's lymphoma, or Hodgkin's disease, as it was called back then. And then 35 years later, I was diagnosed with triple positive breast cancer in 2016. And the thing that really got me through, what I'll say, the thing that got me through my adult cancer experience, because when you're a kid, it was my parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they were my girlfriends, my girlfriends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that part of relationships, you don't understand the power of them until you really need them, or until you you have these things that come to you in life, and you get to really understand the value of the people that are holding you together. I don't think we realize those connections until we reach these points. Roshani, for you, I know that you see patients on a daily basis at high frequency. How many of them are coming alone? How many are coming with girlfriends? And how many of them do you see throughout the journey kind of journeying, with or without friends? What does that look like for you from your perspective?
I would say about 25% of my patients come alone. And, it's kind of sad for me when they don't. And it's at that point, my team and I are jumping in and constantly checking on them so they don't feel that way. But that was always sad for me. And that's when, again, these patient support groups would bring them into them. So then they made new friends and developed that support. And I find that really just improves people's outlook and gives them that I can do this attitude when they're going through something, but they're with people who've gone through the same thing.
So when we talk about support, Christine, what was the type of support that you realized you needed as you journeyed through your process, and even now on the survivor side?
The kind of support I needed. I mean, I was very much, I kind of, when I got the news I had, breast cancer, I was like, okay, I've done this once, I could do it again. And, I'm married, I have my husband and 3 children. At the time, they were I had 2 teenagers and a 10-year-old. So I was very focused on making sure their lives were as minimally disrupted as possible. That was really my focus at the very beginning. And so I was like blind, I had blinders on about just wanting to keep things normal in a completely abnormal situation for my family, right? So that was like my first kind of view of things. I was like, I can do this, no problem. And then I would say I was a couple of months into chemotherapy. It was like a drizzly spring New Jersey day. And I was out walking my dog, and I saw one of my neighbors in the distance who runs every morning. And I was like, oh no. 'Cause I'd lost my hair. I was wearing my baseball hat, whatever. And I'm like, I'm going to have this conversation with my neighbor that I don't really want to have, And so she stopped, and she's like, "What's going on?" And so we had the conversation, you know. And she asked me, she's like, "Well, what can I do for you? Do your kids need rides? Does your house need to be cleaned? Do you need your laundry done?" I kept saying no. I was like, "No, no, we're good. We're totally fine." And she did the most remarkable thing, and this is really what changed my perspective. She put her hands on my shoulder and she gave me a little shake and she said, "Stop it." She said, "People want to help. So you have to let them help." She goes, "Because because you volunteered your whole life, it makes you feel good when you do that. So give other people the chance to take care of you." And that was like
Wow.
amazing.
Mhm,
So a little
mhm.
while later, like later that morning, I was going out to get the mail, whatever. And in my mailbox, there was a little gift bag from my neighbor, and it had a little pendant in it with a guardian angel on it. And I wore that every day after that
Wow.
point, all the way through treatment. For my year of treatment, I wore that. And to remind me, myself, that it was okay to say, yes, yes, I need help. You know, yes, I'd love to go for coffee. Yes, could you please pick my kids up? Yes, can you please, do a meal train for me when I have my breast surgery?
Yes.
But it took that moment, it took that experience for me to like, kind of have that breakthrough. And I'll tell you, it was the most gratifying experience, like it was almost like my whole worldview changed when that happened. Because I realized the more I said yes, the more things came back, that I wasn't doing this all by myself. Even though I have a fabulous husband and a wonderful sister and terrific girlfriends, there was this whole other community out there that was lifting me up, and that was life-changing.
Mhm, mhm. Okay, so Dr. Patel, give us a little bit of data about how many women are currently experiencing a breast cancer diagnosis today. Help us to see who we are as these numbers relate to us statistically.
So statistically in our country, the numbers are 1 in 8 women will get diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime, which is 12.5%. So that's a pretty high number. It can happen to any one of us. Certainly thoughts are that family history may play a role, sometimes genetics, but the genetics is only 15% of the women. Being female, age, all of those things increase, and we don't know why. There are some thoughts that having kids at a later age, hormonal type of, relationship may be involved, but I can't say that that's necessarily true. The thought is that women in developing countries develop less breast cancer, but actually they have more aggressive cancers and develop them at a younger age. And we typically do not have good screening programs in those countries, whereas in the United States, we do have good screening programs. Of course, not everyone has access to them, which is a problem. But, I think we do catch a lot of cancers earlier because of the fact that we have better screening here.
So it's so interesting, Christine, that you and many other survivors will say that while they're in the process, once they've received the diagnosis, they begin to feel alone. But what we're learning is that you're not alone. You become a part of a different community. And the way you look at community begins to evolve because the needs evolve. And so, Dr. Patel, what are some of like you mentioned, a patient support group? Is that the first inroad into building new community, or, and I guess I want to say enlarging your community to support the new needs, right? Because you're not discarding old friends, but you're also integrating different people who can see, relate, and connect with you on another level. So what is the pipeline for that kind of support?
Sure. So I can talk about pre-COVID. COVID has certainly changed the game, and so I'm trying to revamp and redo things a little bit differently. But in my former job, which is in New Hampshire, I focused on exercise support groups and kind of rehabilitation. Because when I moved to New Hampshire, none of that was in existence. There were a lot of support groups, which I think were important in having patients meet with each other who had a breast cancer diagnosis and having discussions about what they went through emotionally. What I found was as we did these exercise-based support groups, it was kind of like this team building type of exercise where people were trying yoga or gentle karate, walking together. And if somebody could not do something as well, somebody would jump in, whether it was myself or another patient, to help that person out. So it's kind of this team approach. And it was very interesting to me just to see the dynamic that developed. That being said, it is really important to have the support groups for the patients in which they find somebody who is going through the same thing. I think as women, we tend to not put ourselves first. I'm guilty of that. I think a lot of us are, because, we go through this and we're like, oh my God, who's going to take care of dinner for the kids or my family? And then I have to work. I need to go to work and I need to do this. And, okay, wait, I have to go for treatment at this time. And then you just kind of go on autopilot and you're going through your activities and your list of things to do every day. But then you have the scary diagnosis and, they don't have that person who can relate to them, or maybe they don't, they don't talk to their families because the families don't always understand. They know that mom is sick, a little tired, but, don't know how to ask mom or the wife how they can help out, but they want to help. They just don't know how. So sometimes sitting in these support groups with my patients, it was interesting to see these discussions that they had, because they were all going through the same thing emotionally and at home as well with their families.
Yeah. So Christine, I'm sure you learned and can relate to a lot of what she said. I'm kind of curious, Dr. Patel, if there is any difference statistically in survival rate, for women who go through the support group process or are more integrated into the community side of things versus women who kind of separate after the diagnosis and don't really lean into that support.
There are some thoughts that there may be differences more with being able to complete treatment and that can-do attitude that there might be a difference in survival rates. I don't know the number offhand, but there have been some studies that have suggested that.
Mm, mhm. So you know what's interesting, Christine and Dr. Patel, as women, we tend to kind of lead the charge when it comes to food and the health of the food and provision where food is concerned in our households. We typically are cooking the majority. Prove me wrong, great girlfriends. If your household is any different, I'd love to know. You can email us and share, but most of us are probably cooking the majority of the meals. We're packing most of the lunches. We kind of lead the charge in this area. And so then to find yourself in a position where you are not capable of supporting yourself in that way, that can literally turn your household upside down. So, and Christine, with you having children at peak age well, I guess there's no peak age of eating with kids. It's just an eternal thing, but but somehow that like 10 to teenage, they seem to eat so much and need so many
Oh
more
yeah.
meals and cooked meals. What was that like for you to then have to, as your neighbor said, let us support you, ask for help, and to trust that what was coming your way would really do the job for your house?
Well, when I was in active treatments, when I was in chemotherapy to
Mhm.
start, my husband's office wanted to help. And they were like, well, let us send you meals on the day that Chris has treatment. So then at least, and I had treatments on Thursdays. So at least they knew that they, could and they were very good about like honoring healthy food choices for us. So there was always like, a lean protein and good vegetables and something sweet for the kids. And that helped tremendously when I was in chemo, because when you get out of chemo, like the last thing you want to do is even like smell food. At least that was the case for me. And your sense of taste, at least for me, was all messed up anyway. Everything I tasted like aluminum foil. So it was just food wasn't
Wow.
like, and I love to cook. I'm a big
Mhm.
cook. And so that whole period of time where I just like, it was just so unappetizing to have to even deal with it. Having my husband's, office do that for us was just tremendous. And then later on in that year, when I finished chemo and I recovered from chemo and I had my breast surgery, um, that's when my one of my girlfriends said, "Okay, now's the time for the meal train." So and they put together a meal train for us for about, I want to say, 3 to 4 weeks, because you can't lift anything after breast surgery, right? Like you're kind of
Wow.
immobilized. You can't even like pick a pot up. Like
Mhm.
my surgeon was like, not even a gallon of milk out of the fridge. Do not lift anything.
Wow. Yeah.
So um so that was really helpful to have, a different person every night, show up at our front door with, something that was going to be good and delicious and sustaining. And, I'm lucky I live in a town with a lot of really good cooks because the meals were really great.
Mhm.
Although my kids, it did get to a point where they were like, "Are you ever going to cook for us again, please?"
Yeah.
But it was really, really helpful during those, that the chemo period and then the post-surgery period when I was just sort of, you know, stuck.
Mhm.
Couldn't really do all those things that I would normally
Mhm.
have done.
That's interesting when you talk about the breast surgery. Something that I hadn't considered is lifting, the mobility that's attached to cooking, and cooking is a full sport. You don't know that until you're not able to participate, right? Like,
Right, right. It's true.
you're like, "I didn't realize all the lifts and the stretches, all these things," but I love that Meal Trains in partnership with Magnolia has created this system that allows for you to have, a means by which you can create and allow your friends to opt in and support and create like a really organized way. So there's no overlap, there's no, old food, and there's not pile up of food coming on one day and you can't eat it all. It really does give you a way to map out that journey and then give you the ability to have some meals that you really love. So what were some of if you had to name Christine's faves,
Oh,
some of your
okay.
faves?
One of my friends makes an incredible chicken francese. So she showed up with that,
Yeah.
I think twice, which was
Ah,
amazing, with
uh-huh.
steamed broccoli. It was just absolutely outstanding. And then another friend made this sort of like, let's say it was like, it was like sort of like a Mexican type casserole, like a taco type
Mm.
casserole, which for a 10-year-old and a 15-year-old boy, that was like, heaven
Yeah.
on the plate, like that's like everything they love, ground beef, cheese,
Yeah.
whatever. But it was delicious. Like it was real comfort food.
Mhm.
And I think people have a good sense, if you sign up for a meal train, you have a good sense of like kind of not just cooking for the body, but like cooking for the soul,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
that you're trying to bring, that emotional aspect
Mhm.
of dining back,
Mhm.
um, that sense of, goodness and,
Mhm.
nurturing. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, that tender loving care. Yeah. Yeah, there's so much that's poured into it. I even think it's another way for you to learn the people in your life because, you may not ever have home cooked meals with some friends. Most of the time, maybe you go out to eat or you've not eaten at their home. And, having that experience gives you a different sense of who they are in terms of their cooking style. And, it kind of establishes a different level of intimacy in your relationships.
Yeah, it does. And some of them gave me their recipes, which were great, and some of them were old family recipes. Like I learned this from my mother-in-law when I first got married. And you
Yeah.
know, so that was kind of nice to your point, like
Yeah.
because you
Yeah.
do get that like other level of insight into somebody who you might otherwise just, from volunteer work or school kids sports or, whatever else.
Yeah.
So
How cool would it be for you to have that cookbook after? To have your own little custom cookbook. And you know what's interesting, that you can still have faves. You mentioned earlier that most foods taste like aluminum after. However, despite that, you still have your faves. There are some meals that still push past that, sort of kind of detach you from, your chemotherapy and the experience of treatment and just take you into this world of taste and connection. And so I think food is a real way for bridging and also creating some micro escapes when you need them from some things that you don't necessarily want to, you don't want to revisit as often, right? Having the taste of aluminum that's heavy for patients. And I know that a lot of people experience aversions during that time frame. So Dr. Patel, what are some of the resources that you would recommend for patients as they are starting their meal train, or even as your, great girlfriends who are listening, who are friends that are partnering on the journey with their great girlfriends who are going through a diagnosis, and they want to begin that process? What would you say are some of the recommendations from a healthcare perspective to start like a really great meal train for patients?
So protein's really important during chemotherapy. When I had first started practice, a lot of my patients were getting the nutrition shakes that have a lot of sugar in them or artificial sweetener. Protein actually helps to boost the immune system. It's important also for keeping the fluid volume in blood vessels. Otherwise, sometimes patients can experience swelling in their legs and arms. We call that edema. So, they get dehydrated as well. So patients generally, we need about 40 to 60 grams of protein a day, but usually when patients are getting chemo, about 60 to 70. Something like a good chicken broth or bone broth or something like that is a good source of protein. There are some good protein powders out there. I typically will recommend for my patients to try to avoid the ones that have any artificial sweetener, such as sucralose or aspartame. Those are two examples. Minimal added sugar, and try to make your own smoothies. And so you can add fruits, you can add peanut butter, you can make your own smoothies at home. I have a whole list of good recipes that I hand out to my patients as well. Keeping in mind that sometimes taste is a little bit tough for people. I totally get that. So you have to think about what you're adding, and think about the fruits and things that you might be able to tolerate taste wise during chemo. Um, hydration is incredibly important as well. And it's not just about drinking water, but a lot of times our patients do get dehydrated during chemotherapy. So one way to hydrate better, think about having water and adding some watermelon, cucumbers, and some mint leaves to that. You're going to get the electrolytes, a little bit of sugar, obviously, if you add watermelon. Things like green tea, adding a little bit of ginger to the tea, whether it's powder or just a little bit of grated ginger, helps with nausea. So those kinds of things are helpful as well. Trying to think what else. If you can tolerate fruits, a lot of times they have some good antioxidants in them. But again, I found that a lot of my patients have problems with taste. During the weeks that my patients are getting chemotherapy, I generally recommend kind of a bland diet, rice, banana, yogurt. And then during the weeks off is where I say, you know what, eat everything you can. If you can eat that burger that you like so much, go for it, because those are the weeks they can really get the nutrition and get the foods that they like. And Christine, from your personal experience, you may agree or disagree with me. I mean, it sounds like your friends are phenomenal cooks. You're making me hungry with that chicken dish. So I'm
Yeah,
assuming that you're able to enjoy some of that during treatment, but maybe you might be able to add a little bit to what I just said from your experience.
well, I completely agree with you. Certainly during the chemo weeks and like immediately post chemo, at least some of the chemo drugs I was on, you know, gave you terrible like GI, side effects. So, I was eating basically what you were saying, bananas, yogurt, you know, really bland foods kind of leading into the chemo. And then in the following week when I'd recovered from, the cycle and my Neulasta shot and all that stuff, by the time, the following week rolled around, and I felt kind of relatively normal again. I would try to, eat like as normally as I could. There were some things I just had, aversions to, taste aversions, things just like that I loved. I just couldn't eat because it was just weird. But I think you find the things that work. I remember somebody asked me, or somebody told me once that they asked their doctor like what the best chemo diet was, and her doctor said whatever you can eat is the best chemo diet. So to your point, if you want to have that hamburger, by all means have that burger. Which seems contrary, right? It seems like contrarian in a way, but you've got to get that protein in you. So
That's so good to know, because so many women who are listening will, you hear that your friend has a diagnosis and you want to support, but you're unsure where to step in. And then what I'm hearing from both of you is that the needs and the appetite changes through the process. When it's almost as as a pregnant woman has no clue what she likes on a Tuesday from a Friday, and you just have to stay available. So I'd love to know from you, Christine, what is like what is one question that a great girlfriend could ask her great girlfriend who's in the process, who's gotten the diagnosis or is even in treatment, and she wants to support her? What's a good question that really makes you feel seen and makes you feel supported?
that's a really good question. And I think really the best question you can ask somebody who's in the middle of it is, what do you need from me? What is it that you need from me? Like, do you need somebody? And let the patient, or let the girlfriend who's in the experience, you know, tell you, and listen and listen. I think that's one of the most important things that you could do to support somebody who's faced with a cancer diagnosis, or any, terrible diagnosis for that matter, or whatever experience in life. I think one of the things that I think can be very difficult for people who are in treatment is, the people coming in and wanting to like give you all sorts of advice, or tell you about their, great aunt who died, or like whatever it is. And I think the best thing you could do for somebody is just be present to them and listen. And then if it's, could you come with me to treatment, or could you drive me to treatment? Could you pick the kids up from school? could you run to the store for me? Would you mind grabbing a gift card from the pizza place so I can give the boys pizza after, practice on Friday or whatever it is, and I think a lot of times people don't know what to say, when someone they care about has been diagnosed with cancer. Um, and that's okay to say too, honestly. It's like, I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what to say, but, make yourself present and then listen. Listen more than anything else.
So, Dr. Patel, from your perspective, what is a question that you think is ideal for a supporter to be able to ask in advocacy for their great girlfriend who's going through treatment?
For me, it's just asking them how they're doing. And even if they tell me cancer sucks or this sucks or, whatever the answer is, sit down and say, okay, what are you having difficulties? But just starting off and just asking, how are you doing? I think a lot of people don't ask that question.
That is so true. And as Christine says, listen. When you do ask the question, listen for what is true. Listen for the answer. I know sometimes we often rush through that because we're expecting to hear, fine, good, make it. But actually listening, and you'll be so much more aware of, things that you would not have known had you not taken the time to ask and listen. I love that. I love that. I'm so grateful because, the idea of a meal train really does give people an opportunity to show up in ways that they may not have known how. And it also invites people to pour love into the people that they care about or not. I mean, even if you're doing it for a neighbor, or someone you heard that was sick at church, or, a school mom or a coworker, whatever it is. I love that Meal Trains, in partnership with Magnolia, has made sure that we have a way to really show our support, rally around the people that we love, and ensure that the journey is not a lonely and isolated one. So I think that is so powerful. Christine, I can't thank you enough. There is a really spicy article. Christine shares how she got her sexual groove back, and I did a little body roll for you. I was like, oh, Christine, this is good. I love it.
Thank
And
you.
on
Thank you.
healthywomen.org. It's under Christine Corrigan's name if you search. And it's called How I Got My Sexual Groove Back, which was really a great read, Christine.
Thanks.
So many
Thanks.
things that you don't realize could even lapse in a person's life during treatments. Like if you've never gone through, you wouldn't fully understand all of the things that a person might be experiencing. Dr. Patel, I'm sure you've seen just a myriad of things that have changed for women as they go through their treatment, and they're also different. So I just want to encourage every great girlfriend that's listening to ask those two specific questions and listen and learn about the differences. And let's not compare, as Christine said, another person's journey, the sequence of things they went through, and assume that we might know because we had a friend that went through it. We had a sister that went through it. Christine might love banana again today, and next month she might hate it. And just because my mom loved it her entire treatment doesn't mean the same for Christine. So I think it's so great that we get to do what's in the best interest of each patient when we can love people and show up individually. So I want to thank you both for making yourself available for this conversation, because there are thousands upon thousands of women that will listen and feel understood and feel seen. And they can also share this with the person in their life whom they want to journey with. You might be inviting people to support you during this transitional time. And this is such a great, little micro toolkit for a great girlfriend to know how to pick up and jump in. And I also want to invite, if you or any of your family members, your friends, your neighbors, your great girlfriends need help during their cancer journey, to please visit healthywomen.org, where you can find information and helpful resources. So special thanks to Healthy Women, special thanks to Meal Train in partnership with Magnolia, special thanks to Dr. Roshani Patel, and special thanks to you, Christine Corrigan,
Thank
for
you.
being with us today.
All right, great girlfriends, did you enjoy this week's episode of the podcast? If so, would you please give us your amazing review on iTunes? Every single review helps another great girlfriend get plugged into the podcast and the community. Speaking of community, make sure you join our Facebook group at The Great Girlfriends. Follow us on Instagram at The Great Girlfriends and on Twitter at @the_great GFS. I'm Sibylla Muti, and I'm out. Peace.